Okay, we're now recording, called the meeting to order at 6:37. The first order of business is just to approve the minutes of the 18th, January 18th meeting. Which, can we do that? I'm trying to think. I don't have them in front of me. Yeah, right? Jacob, you were there?
Yeah, we can. Three of us, I was there.
Okay.
Liam was there.
Great. So is there a motion to approve the minutes of January 18th as written?
So moved.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Excellent. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes of January 18th as written, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Any abstentions? I think we've got one from Suzanne. Great. So motion carries. Great. The minutes have been approved. So the first order of business tonight is to approve the budget. So a copy of the budget went out midweek. Hopefully everybody had a chance to kind of walk through it. Aaron sent out, Aaron sent out via me, a slightly tweaked budget this afternoon. Aaron, do you just want to give a brief explanation of what the tweaks to that one were?
Yeah, so on the expense page at the bottom, the property tax amount to be raised via taxes was correct. Over on the front page, it still had an old amount in it. I sent it out too quickly. So I just updated the front page so that it matched the second page and so that the revenues matched expenses, and it is in balance now.
So I think big picture budget wise, we're in a really good place. We're looking at about a 30% reduction in property taxes going into next year. That basically is looking at going from that 18-month transitional budget back to a 12-month budget. So the 30% reduction is expected, but also really good to actually see. And overall, looking that we're going to go back to what was basically a similar tax rate in 2019, so like 2 years ago. I think we're in a good place. The budget itself doesn't have any big, massive kind of honking projects like the paving project we had to do. So we're lucky enough to avoid any of those large, blow a hole in your budget kind of things. So all in all, I think it's a pretty good, budget as far as impact of the tax rate goes. I want to go over just some little things just that came up during the budget committee, just to note things in the budget. The first of which is just the unreserved funds number. So typically with our budget cycles, we used to do the budget after the year ended. And so we would have an unreserved funds number. That's a real number, basically the amount of money left in our checking account at the end of the year. Now we are doing a budget where we're forecasting out, and so we don't have those end of year figures. So the unreserved fund number has to be taken. Well, we can't just take it from a bank statement, basically. Aaron, do you want to give a really brief summary of kind of how you came up with the unreserved funds number, just so folks understand that? I think Aaron might be frozen, which is okay. Still unfreeze eventually. So essentially, I'll try to answer that for her until she can hop back on. So basically, the unreserved funds number was taken by calculating the ending bank balance of the general fund and then subtracting any outstanding checks and withdrawals that we have coming. Oh, Aaron, you're back.
Go consolidated.
Yeah. Do you want to give a brief explanation of the unreserved funds number, Aaron, and how you came up with it?
Sure. So usually it's a straight clean cut, take the ending bank statement balance and subtract any outstanding checks or withdrawals, add in any outstanding deposits. and you get a books balance. Then you take all the fund balances, add them up together and subtract them from your books balance. And whatever's left is the unreserved funds amount. I didn't hear exactly how far you got with how we estimated this year. Do you want me to get into that too?
Yeah, no, I basically explained the whole, we don't
Okay.
have an ending bank account balance. So yeah, go for it.
So we had to kind of forecast, given what we had left in our budget for expenses to spend and what we have left in the budget of revenues to collect. So basically we had to just kind of look at it as a cash in, cash out factor at this point and try to do our best estimate of what we still have left to spend, subtract that from our balance and add in what we still had left to collect. So the unreserved funds balance from here on out, because we're going to be running this like year end is not actually the end of our budget season anymore. It's going to have to be this estimated amount, which is just something that we're just going to have to be mindful of as we work towards the rest of our budget in ending in June.
So does that make sense to everybody? I mean, this is always one of those numbers every year that trips us up and we always get caught on. And it's always one of those things that we look at, and if it's a negative number, we're banging our head against the wall. If it's a positive number, we're in a better place. And so this year we're kind of coming into the budget with an unreserved fund figure of around $35,000, which is great. And I think that's really strong because you know, we've had, you know, our tax revenue collection of current taxes and delinquent taxes has been great. So we're in a pretty good spot from that perspective. We've tried to be pretty spot on with budgets. So we're in okay shape on the unreserved fund side of things. So I want to run through just kind of like basically my highlight notes that I took throughout the process, just things that I thought was important to point out. Do people want me to screen share the budget and I can try to show where these items would be reflected, or do you have a copy in front of you, or what's people's pleasure in terms of how that works?
I have a copy in front of me, but screen sharing is also great. Yeah, great.
Okay, great. Then let me just pull up the budget real quick. Okay, so screen share. Okay, so can people see that okay? Yeah, okay. So again, that unreserved funds number is this number up here that Aaron was just talking about. So just to kind of, again, run through some of the just high points that I wanted to note from the budget process, because these are things that impact revenues or expenses. One interesting thing when we look at revenues down in this line around recording fees, you can see our actual for this past year is about 16,000. We had budgeted 13,000. 16,000 is really high. Just kind of a point of information, that's because we've had a higher number of property transfers than in any previous year that we can remember. We had about 87 properties transfer this past year, representing about 8.5% of the tax base. So we had a lot of properties change hands this year. And so a combination of that happening and with some higher fees associated with that are set by the state, we ended up in recording fees coming out much higher than budgeted. We have dropped it down to 11,000 in the budget to be conservative. I don't think we expect to see the same pace, but we have put a conservative number there. But just that number jumps out as being a lot higher than expected. So that's where that came from. Conversely, some of our fees that we typically collect around things like hunting license, we didn't see that revenue this year because a lot of folks have moved online. So for example, you can get your hunting license online, and so we're not getting those kind of fees in the office, and therefore we're not seeing that end of it. So again, just an interesting, point of information there. So I guess let me ask folks, I can skip around and hit highlights on this, or would you like to just stick with revenue and bring up any questions around revenue that people have at this point? What's the most beneficial to people?
I'm happy to follow your tour, and I'll just shout out with questions as I have them,
Okay,
unless others have a strong preference.
No, I agree to follow Charlie's lead.
okay, great.
Yep, let's do it.
So jumping to expenses, the general gov operating expenses. So a couple things around here that we've seen. One is that, you know, we have, yeah, so as far as general gov operating expenses go, every year we tend to see increases in our insurance rates. We are seeing our workman's comp insurance rate go up this year. So those kind of changes are under general government expenses reflected in this line. So there's been some increases there. As far as town office payroll, one thing that we have seen there, which is really encouraging, is that we switched to MVP from Blue Cross Blue Shield this past year. And in doing that, we saved about $16,000 in health insurance costs to the town. Liz also switched this past year to a different plan, which added about $11,000 in savings. So overall, we're looking at about a $27,000 savings in health insurance costs, which is great. Another thing to point out in this budget, and again, I can't point to the exact line because this hits a number of lines, but a broader thing, you know, this budget does reflect a cost of living increase for town employees at a minimum. So that kind of CPI +1 that we talk about, which is referenced in contracts, it's about a 2.8% increase. So this does reflect increases in salaries or wage rates. Another thing in here, this is a totally minor one because it's like minutia in the budget, but we did increase the health officer stipend from $150 to $300. That hasn't changed in over 10 years, I think. So we felt it was time to bump that up given how much activity it's had in the past couple of years. Debt service, if we go down to debt service, something you'll notice here is that the 2016 truck has been paid off. So we're saving about $27,000 annually in debt service. Looking at public works, this is reflected in kind of the public works part of the expense budget, but also has a bearing on the reserve account allocations. Again, the only big project that we'd be saving for from an infrastructure standpoint would be paving the public service building lot. We've got an estimate of about $61,000 to do that. The plan to do that, should we move forward with it, would be to pay for it out of the infrastructure replacement fund. We're going to be putting $30,000 into that budget this year. That already has about $73,000 in it. So that would give us more than enough cushion to do that paving should we need to do it. We are looking at some alternatives for paving, instead of paving the whole lot, doing some alternatives that are a little bit more cost effective. The only other big kind of...
Charlie,
oh, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Charlie. Really quick question on that. If I remember correctly, but just wanted to confirm, this is actually one of my questions. And we're not expecting to be eligible for any grants for that, right? That was, we're under no illusion that that would be.
Yeah, no, there won't be any grants. No.
Yeah, didn't think so. Just checking.
The other only kind of big project related item that we are looking at is the Grange Hall. We talked about this at the last meeting, but the chimney is kind of falling in on itself. It's damaged the furnace. We've got it running now for the time being. It should work for town meeting day for the polling place, but we're looking at converting that over to a propane furnace. And so that is something we would pay for out of the Building Capital Improvement Fund. We're looking at a $40,000 allocation to that account this year. That's already got about $85,000 in it. So that would bring us up to a point where we could pay for the furnace at the Grange Hall, as well as some of the first phases of work with any of the renovations at the public service building, or at least covering the design elements, thinking that that might still be a year out before we do any kind of construction. But we have gotten the needs assessment from the library back. The town office has done theirs. And so now we're going to move into a phase where we're looking at just some designing and engineering work. But that would come out of the Building Capital Improvement Fund, again, which already has $85,000 in it. We'll be putting another $40,000 into it there. Long range, one thing we have to think about is the Longley Bridge project. We do have a TAP, Transportation Alternatives Program grant for that. That does require about $75,000 in match. However, that's not going to show up until at least the 2020 FY23 budget. So that's not reflected here anywhere. Let's see. Projects and events. Sorry, I'm still getting used to the new format for this when we look at it in this way. So one thing around that we've talked about is FEMA. You know, all of the FEMA related expenditures came out in this column here, the year to date total 300,000 right here. So that is what's reflecting essentially the FEMA work that we've done this year to recover from the Halloween storm. So that's where that actual comes from. From a revenue side of things, you know, we don't have that showing up here. And that's only because we've already gotten about $97,000 in this. Actually, that might show up under actuals. No. So the FEMA reimbursements aren't going to show up in this budget for next year because we've already gotten 97,000 in, and we're expecting another 10 to 20,000 before the close of this budget. So that won't fall in the FY22 budget.
It's factored into the unreserved number. That's where it is accounted for.
Yep.
But can I just add to that, of that 332,886 in projects and events, that also does include the paving of Hill West and West Hill this year.
Yeah.
It's not all the FEMA reimbursement.
For the expenditures, you mean?
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So that's where that massive number comes in. Let's see. So highway payroll, one thing, it's a bright spot. We had budgeted 306,000. Our actuals came in year to date at 207. Again, we have 3 months left, but the trajectory that we're on looks like we're actually noting quite a bit of cost savings in highway payroll. And so our projected budget has a $215,000 figure there. In general note being that we're seeing some savings in highway payroll that we're expecting to continue forward. One thing that did come as a surprise, which put a little bit of a hole in our budget, is under contracted services for the highway department, which, let's see, Aaron, what line am I looking for St. Ange's?
44.
Line 40. Yeah, here we go. Line 44. What you'll notice here, our budget was 16,000. The actual was 60,000. So road maintenance, that includes contracted services. And we got a bill this year for the work that St. Ange did almost 2 years ago, if not more, with the bridge work around Cote Road. And that was something that just wasn't on our radar anymore and we did not budget for. And so that kind of put a big hole in the year-to-date actuals under that. Generally, with materials, we are noting that the price of gravel does continue to go up, and we are seeing some increase shortages in supply. We've talked about that in the past. It's probably something we're going to have to deal with more in the future. Overall, though, the materials budget is projected down about $20,000. And the reason for that being that as far as the projected goes, we're trying to budget a more realistic figure for that. Jumping back to reserve account appropriations, machinery replacement fund, we're looking to put $27,000 into this account for next year. The 27 was more or less the figure that was the debt service on the old fire truck that we had been putting in there to pay for the new pumper. The new pumper was bought last year. That kind of drained our machinery replacement fund down. We're looking to put 27,000 into that. The projected need there being that our current tractor is a 1976 tractor. It's becoming increasingly hard to get parts for it. And so we are probably going to have to buy a new tractor for the road crew at some point this year or next. So those funds are kind of being earmarked for that purpose. We talked about the furnace at the Grange Hall, which would be about 18,000. And those are kind of like my highlights from the budget. Again, I didn't walk through everything line by line, which we can certainly do. But those are the things that I kind of wanted to point out that are reflected in here. Sue or Aaron, is there anything in the budget that you want to comment on that I missed?
No.
I don't think so.
Right.
Maybe just under agency requests, Hazen's Notch is zeroed out for budget season per their request. I just don't want people to think that that was just got cut by anything. Minor, but notable.
Erin, where's Conservation Commission? That's not under, oh no, that's up at the top right there. Yeah, I got it.
That's zeroed out as well.
Yep.
Per request. Yep.
I'm
So
trying to
Aaron's thinking, I
scroll
guess-
this budget and I can't.
Yeah.
No, it's fine.
Basically, here's the nuts and bolts down here of what we're looking at.
Yeah.
You know, total budgeted expenses, less unreserved funds, less non-tax revenue. That's basically what the proposed property taxes are going to have to raise. Put against this year's grand list, here's what we're coming up with a projected property tax revenue based on this municipal budget. So again, we're looking at about a 30% decrease in this budget. Again, it's going from an 18-month to a 12-month. Plus, we've talked about some of the fluctuations around savings and things like health insurance, or some of the personnel costs, some of the higher costs that we're going to have around other things, and then reserve account allocations, etc. I'm going to stop. Oh yeah.
Charlie, do you think at your informational meetings that people are going to actually want to know, like what the cut, exactly what the dollar figure was for the cuts? Or, I mean, I'm trying to think about what people are going to ask.
Yeah, I do expect there'll be some of that. And so what I'm hoping is that I can convince Aaron to come to both of those with the NEMRIC system open, so that we can query those directly. Any of these lines, there's a number of things that feed into like each one. And so if somebody does want to know, like, how much did we spend on gravel? Like, we can pull that number
Right.
Directly. So we will have those handy.
I was thinking.
Yeah,
they
I
were
gotta say,
gonna-
oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
I was just thinking they were gonna know in that 30% decrease, okay, we're going from an 18-month to a 12-month, where else did we save? That's what I was thinking. They're gonna
Yep.
ask.
Yeah. Yeah, this is gonna be, even tonight, this is different because typically when we're doing this, we're sitting at a table and we each have a copy in front of us and like, we're not trying to screen share or look at it differently. And so it's a little bit of a challenge in terms of the dynamics of this with the group and the hearings being what they're gonna be. It's gonna be a challenging, different dynamic. Any questions from the board? Anything that came up while reviewing it on anybody? I'm going to stop screen sharing for now so I can see everybody. Anything come up during your review of it that you want to talk about? Yeah, Jacob, go ahead.
Actually, all the questions that I'd come up with you addressed, which is great. So I feel like I'm pretty well caught up. Except for line 93, the Northwest Unit for Special Investigations. I don't recall seeing that in the past. Can you give a quick explanation of who they are, what that's for?
Yeah, that's a new one this year. And typically when we get social agency requests in, the first thing the budget committee does is we say, did you have an impact in town? Because if you didn't have an impact in town, you're great, but we're not going to fund you.
Right.
This is a group that does exactly what they say they do. They are kind of a private or nonprofit arm of investigation work outside of like the state police, even though they do work together sometimes. And according to what we were informed of, they assisted in 3 or 4 different cases in Montgomery this past year. And so as kind of a token of the community's appreciation for their work, we have given them $100 in this budget.
Cool. That's good to hear. Do we have any more information on so it sounds like, do we know anything about them? Who are they respond to, jurisdiction, anything at all?
I can find out more information. Scott knew more about them. So he was able to kind of inform the budget committee on this, but I will get more detail on that because that's a great point. Why is it there?
Charlie, if you shared even their letter was pretty self-explanatory too. What they do and where they serve.
Cool. That'll be in the town report.
Yep.
The other one that's new here under agency requests is the Grateful Treads. We're looking at $250 for them. And that was simply because they've been super active in town and a lot of their funding has come from grants. And one of the questions that a lot of their granting agencies continually asks them is, do you have any kind of support from your community from an official standpoint? And so this is so that they can say, yes, we do. And that hopefully will help open doors to other funding.
Right. And we felt they did a great job.
Yeah. I guess I don't have another question, but the overall comment I would give is I'm super pumped to see that we're able to reallocate appropriations to the reserve accounts and also these additional agency requests while keeping the budget more or less where we were expecting it to return to. It sounds like we may be like a few percentages short of back to where we would have been prior, but that's pretty awesome, especially in a pandemic year. I feel pretty thrilled to see that we're able to. We're not having to, borrow from our future to pass this year's budget, which was my biggest concern. So that's good job, budget committee. That's really laudable, and I'm super grateful to you all for tunneling through all of that and bringing us such a well-developed budget. It's terrific. I'm really grateful.
And just say thank God for Erin. Yeah,
I gotta say, Aaron's work on this, not only in like the numbers, but in the formatting and the process.
Right.
And this was one of like the most streamlined, efficient budget processes that I've ever worked through. So Aaron deserves.
I've been almost 20 years, and this was the best.
Yeah. So.
Thanks, guys.
All hail, Erin. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys. I'm happy to. I love it. It's fun. It's fun. But I also, just on that note, I think that this budget also is the most realistic. Like, we got the number down, but we really went realistic route for materials and gas prices and all of that. So it's definitely the one I feel the most comfortable about so far too.
Yep.
That's great.
So what I will do, I meant to have this done by tonight, but I didn't have a chance this weekend. I was trying to get the rest of the FEMA stuff done. But I will draft a letter and circulate it to the board for comment or review, I should say. And that'll go into the town report, but that letter will be the same kind of one that we have every year that will kind of walk through some of the budget stuff like we just did, articulate what's going on. And so I'll circulate that when I have a draft so that folks can take a look and get back to me on that. And I apologize for not having that ready prior to tonight. So if folks are comfortable with the budget, then the first order of business would be to approve the budget. So I would make a motion that the board adopt the fiscal year 22 budget of $1,235,606, of which $862,735 shall be raised by taxes and $334,363 by non-tax revenues. Sorry, period. And I can get you texted that, Genevieve. So again, that's just a motion to adopt the FY22 budget in the amount of $1,235,606, of which $862,735 shall be raised by taxes and $334,363 by non-tax revenues. And that's basically just a reflection of the statement at the end of the budget that has those summations.
I'll second
So
it.
we have a second from Leanne. Great. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no further
I have a
discussion.
question.
Yeah, go ahead, Suzanne. Yeah, go ahead, Suzanne.
The emergency services.
You might need to turn your video off just so we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep. Can you hear us?
Okay, 741. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, line 41.
year to date, that's not the right number. That's missing a digit.
Oh, good
Um,
catch.
versus for. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes more sense.
Yeah, sorry. So that won't
On there
affect
now.
the budget numbers, but that actual does need to get amended. Good catch, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All right. Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. We have adopted the budget. So next we'll move on. Yeah, we'll move on to the warning next. So I emailed out a copy of this earlier this evening. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to review it or not, but what I will do is I will screen share that so that we can walk through it as well. Oops. All right, can everybody see this?
Ooh, can you make it a little bigger?
Better?
Yeah.
Okay, so big picture, the warning this year is going to look a lot different because we're not warning a specific meeting, we're warning the voting. And so essentially the warning is going to be a direct reflection of what's going to be on the ballot. And so it's structured a little bit differently, and there's a little bit less information in previous years because we need to legally make this match the ballot, and there's certain things that go on the ballot. So for example, whereas in past years, our warning has said, you know, a select person for the term of 2 years by ballot, so-and-so term expires, you know, that's missing here again, because this is what's going to be reflected on the ballot per statute requirements and things. So the look of the ballot, or the look of the warning, is going to be a little bit different. There's also going to be some things that are not on here because we're not doing them. Elect a moderator is not the first item on the warning because we're not having a town meeting. It's going to be Australian ballot, so we're not electing a moderator. Same with accepting the reports of the town officers. You know, that's not going to be on the ballot, so it's not showing up here. So structurally, the warning is going to look different this year than it has in past years. That being said, the first article is very much like what we typically see, and these are the elections. And so these are all the positions that are up for election this year. I think Liz has gotten consent of candidate forms back for at least everybody who is interested in running as an incumbent, and I know that she's gotten at least one, if not 3 or 4 consent candidate forms for folks that are not incumbents who are interested in running. So those who have submitted the consent of candidate forms by 5 o'clock today, their name will show up on the ballot. If no one submitted a consent of candidate form for any of these positions, it would essentially be all write-in. I do believe that we have consent of candidate forms for each one of these, so none of them will essentially be a blank spot on the ballot. There will be a person there. There will be also an opportunity for a write-in candidate, but at least all of these have a name attached to them that someone, you know, who is interested in running for the position. So these are all pretty self-explanatory. It's just a reflection of that document that we have that reflects, you know, what office is expiring when. So this should, again, don't need to spend too much time here. First article, the election of town officers. Second article is going to be, shall the voters authorize the treasurer pursuant to the statute reference to collect current taxes? This is something that we need to do based in statute. Now that now that the municipal treasurer is appointed, we need to clarify this with a vote to allow the treasurer to collect current taxes. It's not, you know, shouldn't be controversial or anything else. It's basically just clarifying from a legal perspective that Aaron can collect current taxes. This doesn't impact delinquent taxes or anything that happens there, just the current taxes. So that is Article 2. Article 3, this is exactly what we just passed, adopted. This is the budget. This is the question regarding the budget. So this is going to be different this year because at town meeting, we list out every budget item. We list out the department allocations. We list out the reserve account allocations. We list out the sums of money for town officers as requested. We list out social service agencies. This year, after a lot of back and forth, we decided to bake it all into one question. There's 2 reasons for that. One is that because we're not voting on it from the floor, we can't amend things in real time. So if we listed all of the budget items out for separate vote, that total, we couldn't amend that. So for example, if one of the budget items failed, but the final budget item reflected the total that we were expecting, that couldn't be amended, which means we couldn't pass the actual budget. Does that make sense to everybody? So because we can't amend things from the floor, we've rolled it all into one article, and it's basically vote it up or vote it down, very similar to how the school works. The other reason why we didn't break it out into 37 separate articles was just that, again, this is all going to be counted by hand in the Grange Hall like we always do, and we didn't want the people who, you know, volunteered to do that to be there until 6 a.m. Working through, you know, 40 different budget items. Any questions on that or any comments or reflections? So this is probably going to be one of the biggest changes as far as formatting goes with how we vote on things. One budget question, up or down, you know, yeehaw.
I think it's good, same as the school.
Not to say that we won't go back to the old way next year if we're back in the Grange Hall, but this year it's going to be different. Article 4, this has been there the past few years. This is regarding the 1/2 cent increase to the tax rate to the conservation fund. Same language that's been there in past years is the language that you're seeing here. So that's page 1 of the warning. Again, page 1 is just the election of officers, the clarification of the treasurer as current tax collector, the budget question, again, rolling it all into one question, and then the one that's been there in the past, this conservation reserve fund. So moving to page 2. So this will take some additional explanation here, and this gets at that report that I sent out around financing options for the wastewater system. These questions reflect what was in that report, and we can talk about them after I walk through them. But essentially, these 3 questions relate to financing the wastewater system. The first question is, shall the voters establish a sewer reserve fund? This is essentially the same thing as establishing any other reserve fund. It just allows us to have a fund that we can put money in, which is legally earmarked for a cause. If we're going to be collecting revenue to support a municipal wastewater system, we need a place to put that revenue where it's, you know, earmarked specifically for that purpose. This article would do that. This article has nothing to do with spending money. It just establishes a fund. So functional, not spending money or raising money. These 2 get at the financing that was in the report. The first one is, shall the voters approve an additional tax in an amount not to exceed 0.0612 per $100 of assessed property value for a period not to exceed 30 years. So that's 6 cents for every $100 of assessed property value. This is that sewer benefit assessment, although we're not using that word here because that can mean something different legally, even though we've used it differently in our discussions. That is one of the mechanisms that we've determined we would have to have in order to pay the debt obligation on this system. Baked into the municipal budget is the allocation the town gives to the water bond every year. It's just baked right in the budget. What I'd like to do is pull the question around this out to a separate article outside of the municipal budget for complete transparency purposes, so folks understand what it is, what it's for, and what it's supporting. So this is the first item in that financing options. The second item in the financing options in order to pay the debt service on the wastewater system would be the imposition of a 1% local option tax. So that's what's reflected in Article 7. That would be a 1% local option tax on sales, meals, and alcoholic beverages and rooms. The funds that are generated from that would go into the sewer reserve fund. So these 2 articles, 6 and 7, are the 2 mechanisms that through the financing work that we've done, we would need to impose in order to generate the revenue to pay the debt service on the wastewater project, essentially allowing us to keep rates financially affordable for the users. We'll circle back to those in a minute to talk more in depth about that. Article 8, this is one that we talked about before, which the board was in favor, I believe, of adding to the warning. This is, shall the voters authorize cannabis retailers and integrated licensees to operate in Montgomery pursuant to the recent law. And then lastly, this is the one the board decided to add, even though the petition we got was not quite legal based on what they were asking, but it was in good faith, and the board decided to add this to the warning. This is that article about opening all town roads to ATVs. That's the last article, Article 9, and then you have the spaces where we all sign, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to stop screen sharing so we can get into some discussion around this. Yeah, so I'll just open the floor up to discussion.
Can you clarify what part was not fully legal about the petition?
So the petition was asking us to put that question to the voters by Australian ballot. I believe
that whole piece.
Remember, and
yeah.
like functionally
Yeah.
we could do it. So it was like it had the signatures, it had the language, but it was asking us to do something we legally couldn't do. And so it wasn't like they came back with half the signatures or something like that. They
Right.
came back, so I think the board said, look, it was submitted in good faith. We'll put it on the warning.
Gotcha. But at this point, it is legal in that we're by Australian ballot. So, or am I?
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, it's legal to do it. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
conversely, the board also talked about the police services contract and said, look, we got a petition that didn't have the required number of signatures. Because we had that on there last year, we said, look, guys, and I told the people interested in this, if you want to do it, you've got the time, get us the petition. We did not receive one. And so therefore that did not end up on the warning. Yeah.
That was going to be one of my questions. Did they ever end up following all the way through on that? And it sounds like they did.
No,
Okay.
we did
Great.
not receive any other petitions for items to be added to the warning this year.
Are we shifting our communication strategy in any way for advance notice, discussion, public information sessions, whatnot? I mean, my recollection from prior conversations that we're going to hold a series of online meetings, kind of again like splitting between weekends and weekdays, or weekend evenings and weekday evenings and weekends. And I didn't know if there's any other.
One thing we're going to have to, at the end of this, after we approve the warning, we're going to have to figure out what dates we want for those. So we'll have that conversation in a second. As far as like other information goes, the town report will be, the town report. The letter that goes in there is going to have a lot of information around a lot of these issues. We're also going to so around the wastewater financing stuff, we're going to be re-engaging the Montgomery Thrive site. The full financing report that I sent you guys, that'll be up there. So anybody can look at it, anybody can see it, as well as kind of a summary explanation of what it is and what we came out with. Just to recap that in general, basically the vote back in the summer, that was the bond vote, was the voters giving the board borrowing authority in the full amount of the project. And we said to everybody right then, we would never go to bond for the full amount, but we need that authority to get the offer from the USDA Rural Development. Now that we have that offer, we know what our debt obligation would be. And that report summarizes how the hell do we pay for it? What are our options? What do each one mean? What's the risk associated with it? And so the best options came up here. So this is basically us saying to the town, you gave us permission to chase this. We chased it, we figured it out. And here is how we think it would be feasible to do if you want to move forward. So this is kind of like the next step in that chain of events. And then just as a footnote to that, the streetscapes project is still kind of on hold until spring. We did have a TAP application go in to support that, but there's nothing on the ballot this year or this town meeting regarding the streetscapes portion of stuff.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. That was actually kind of where I was getting at. The not to beat around the bush, but I was curious if there was something specific around the wastewater to help unpack that more. And I was going to suggest tapping into the Thrives community process, cheerleaders. Like I think this is one of those places where like the grassroots communication approach, I think will carry a whole lot more water than just some informational meetings. And because it was born from that place, getting back into that place seems super relevant and helpful. So that's awesome. I'm psyched to hear that. That's great.
Yeah, so assuming the board adopts the warning tonight as written, the rest of this week will be a case of getting the pieces in place for that, the information up, and the warning gets posted Thursday, I think. Anyway, so that'll get re-engaged as soon as the green light's given tonight. Any other questions?
Can I ask, I have just one more question. I'm sorry to be hogging the stage. The Article 8, I remember when I came to the board and we're like, yeah, totally, let's get it on there and put it on the warning. Actually, I haven't read 7 VSA 63, and I didn't have enough time to check that before here. I didn't know if either the petitioners or you or anyone else kind of confirmed that like that language or that structure is actually relevant to state statute. Like, was that constructed in a
so I will. I will note that I did have Charlie Merriman review all this stuff today. And so,
great.
yeah, the town attorney has looked this over to double check language, statute references, all that jazz.
Great.
So we do
Super.
have the-
Okay, cool. Thank you. So I should have assumed that, but I was like, oh, that seems like awfully light language. I would have thought there'd be a little more like verbiage. It's not that there isn't. It's great.
Which one was that?
That was Article 8, which reads, shall the voters authorize cannabis retailers and integrated licensees to operate in Montgomery
Thank you.
pursuant to 7 VSA 863. Yep. I'd love to hear, I mean, if there's no other questions, that's fine too, but I would love just to hear some feedback on specifically some of the financing things around the wastewater project. I mean, how do people feel about this? I mean, anytime we ask for more money from people, it's hard. And you know, we are going to see this 30% reduction in the tax rate, which is great in the municipal budget. However, the article here would add cents back to that tax rate, which has an impact. I mean, 6 cents per $100 of assessed property value, you're looking at $60 per $100,000. My math is right. So, you know, your property's worth $200,000. You're paying $120 a year extra towards a wastewater system. I don't know. I mean, does that sound outrageous? Or...
I
And
haven't
that's
heard
for the
anything
whole-
from
oh.
people except that, you know, oh yeah, you know, it's going to be a little bit more money, but when we look at the benefit of the whole program, people are positive about it. You know, no one ever wants to spend more money than what they want, but when you look at the long run and you look at, you know, what benefits it's going to bring to the town, then I've heard positive.
Great.
Is there a way in Article 5 just to really clarify that that's just setting up the reserve fund and not actually financing anything?
Yeah, so the language in Article 5 is the legally required language to establish the reserve fund. We tried to structure it in a way that it was clear that essentially that article is not asking for money or anything. It's just kind of setting up that fund. Again, given that we have to do this within the framework of what statute requires for this kind of an article, that was kind of what we came up with. So hopefully people understand that that one is just a structural thing and not a monetary ask.
Okay.
Yeah, Larry.
And then the next two articles are basically the way you get the money to put in the reserve fund.
Exactly.
So should you be changing the order of those three articles?
No, we put the first one there because we can't really accept the money and put it anywhere until we have a reserve fund. And so we figured, create the reserve fund.
I'll hold on to it for you.
Yeah. I mean, if Article 5 gets adopted and Article 6 and 7 don't, I mean, it'll be an empty reserve fund unless we can figure out another way to finance it. And again, that full report, if people haven't had time to read it all, that's fine. But the full report, we will post on the Thrives website, and that goes through the calculations for both of these. It also gets into what the rate structure would look like, what connection fees would have to be, what other things. It gets into some of the things around the TIF district discussion that we've had and kind of some challenges there. So that report really kind of does the deep dive into all of our options, how they work, what the risk is. Because one of the other parts of this is that, you know, in setting up the financing for this, we have to do it in a way where we're not setting it up to be incredibly risky. You know, the first shot at this that we had actually had a key of the financing be the connection fees, right? And new people connecting. And you know, we had it there, and Aaron looked at it and had a really great point, which he was like, the risk of looking at that scale of connections over that time frame, that might not happen. And if that doesn't happen, all of a sudden the town is left holding the bag for X thousands of dollars that we don't have. And so, you know, structuring this in a way where we have the least amount of risk was really important.
Yep. So my one comment on on the report, and I will admit I skimmed it. I did not read it exhaustively, and that might actually. And I'm someone who's actually really interested in this stuff. It seems that probably one of the biggest lifts is going to be to like convince folks to approve money, and we don't have the benefit of a lot of like captive audience communication of an in-person meeting, whereas we could like really get into it and really explain to everyone in the room that's going to vote, and like we can hold their attention. And so that was part of my questioning also around the like communication strategy. I think if there's anyone with some decent graphic design skill on the Thrives committee, or other associate volunteer, or there's any funding left in Hoyle Tanner's budget to get like a one-page infographic that's just like super visual as to like why like this is like we feel this is the best reason, like, and I know I wouldn't present, I project to give any more like advice, having not really worked through that to distill that. But my general understanding around the psychology of people and money is that if they're confused, then they don't take action. And my biggest concern is that the number of folks that are going to be willing to digest the report in its entirety are going to be pretty slim, and that most folks are probably going to be confused and just say no. That would be my biggest concern. And if there was a way of just like in a super visual, high level, like, we've looked at this, like we really thought about this, here's some basic information, links to more info, this, even if a small percentage of folks are like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, no, get it now, that might be meaningful in getting passage.
You're right, Jacob. You're right, Jacob, especially the people on the outer skirts of the town are going to misinterpret it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Jacob. And so that's some of the work we're going to be doing with Zach on the website, and some of that trying to basically distill the high points and get it out in a way that's visually appealing and makes sense. And
yeah, like cartoon bubble diagrams of like really big bars or really little bars, and like just like people like post it on their Facebook and Instagram, and like, oh, got it. Like,
no, I hear you.
That's how communication's going these days. It's unfortunate, but it's real. And my other question was around the local option tax. It's funny, I was like kind of up until seeing the warning this evening, I've sort of been like, and the whole local option tax thing in general, just wasn't really convinced it was a great fit for our community. However, for this topic, given like it does seem like there's actually a really good alignment there between, it's being funded by revenue generated primarily in our center and downtown to benefit that region. So like, I'm kind of bought in just knowing that. Again, maybe part of this is a question that I have right now, and then would also maybe be a useful communication strategy, is what kind of buy-in there's been for that from the business community in town. I have to assume high, because they're represented really well in the sewer task force, but just can you speak to that a little bit, and how much backing from the business community is there on this?
As far as the business community backing of the local option tax, I can't speak to that, because with everything the way it is now, we haven't had the chance to go and do the sit down. I mean,
the groundwork.
We finished this last week. And so I really don't know. I mean, I know in the past, Darren's said a 1% local option tax makes me much less competitive than New Hampshire. And so, there's good points on each side of it. At the end of the day, though, but I think an infographic would be great. I mean, a picture of a pint of Pabst Blue Ribbon, and it says $4.50 for a pint. What's the local option tax compute to? Like 3 cents, I mean, like, but we're looking at raising approximately $35,000 annually on that. And the thing about that tax rate, that 6 cents, So that is fixed at no less or not to exceed 6 cents. But the idea with this project is over time, we're going to see growth and development, and that's going to increase the size of the grand list. Our debt service won't increase. Therefore, that can go down over time. So the hope is that that 6 cents we're looking at now in another 5 years can be lower, you know? So it's designed in a way to scale down as it scales up so that the individual impact to individual taxpayers is reduced as the project moves forward and we see the impacts that we're expecting, hoping, praying, et cetera, to see.
Yeah, that makes sense. That'd be good to communicate too. Yeah, yeah. That wasn't on my radar. I'm like, oh yeah, right. That flexibility is notable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anything else on the warning?
A high percentage of that should be paid by tourists.
Okay, if there's nothing else on the warning, then I would entertain a motion to adopt the warning for a town meeting.
So moved.
Great.
Or I move to adopt that. Yeah, yeah. You need to say it out loud. You got.
Yep, we've got a motion from Jacob to adopt the warning. Is there a second? I'll give that one to Suzanne. I saw Suzanne's hand go up first. So we have a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion carries. Great, so the last thing we need to do is just nail down what dates we want to have the informational meetings. One thing that I wasn't able to check, I didn't have time to check, that maybe someone here can answer, is for the towns that do this annually, I think Richford does everything by Australian ballot, maybe.
Yeah.
When do they have an informational meeting? Is it the night before? Is
Richard
it-
has theirs Monday night.
Okay.
I'm
So
not
I guess
sure about Enosburg.
what I would offer is, what if we did Saturday, the 27th of February at like 10 a.m. And then we did one Monday night at 6 p.m. the night before town meeting.
In lieu of your select board meeting?
Yeah, in lieu of the
Yeah.
select board meeting.
Yep. And Charlie, what time would you start the one on Monday night? It would have to be earlier probably than 6:30, don't you think?
I would start it at 6 if that works for folks. But I'm open to suggestions. I was thinking 10 a.m. for the one on Saturday and 6 for the one on Monday night. Does that sound okay to everybody? Okay. Then we have our informational meeting set for Saturday, the 27th at 10 a.m. and Monday, the 1st at 6 p.m. So we'll get the notices up around that. So, great. Well, with
And
that,
are
we have,
those aren't warned. Sorry, Charlie. Those aren't warned meetings, correct?
I'll warn
info
them because
meeting?
the board will be there, so I'll warn them as select board meetings.
Sure.
But they're not going to be other kind of ones. I see a hand in the air over on Larry's side. Yeah.
Anita has a question.
I have
Yeah.
a question. When do you need my last report before you go to print?
So our target to get the town report to the printer is February 12th.
Oh, okay. All right,
Was that a
But
thank
we
you?
may go sooner.
I'll put it on my
Bird.
calendar.
We're ahead of schedule.
Okay, we are ahead of schedule, so if you can get it sooner, that'd be great, but the,
Oh, I
the
can
target
get it.
dropped.
I can get it to you anytime. I just like to keep updating it. So it's
Okay. Great. Awesome. Well, with that, we've covered all the business of the evening, and a motion to adjourn is always in order.
So moved.
Great. We have a motion from Jacob. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Second from Leanne. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Well, thank you, everybody, for a good meeting, and just watch your inbox, and I'll get that letter out shortly, and we'll move forward. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.